Hi, everybody. Today we're going to be talking all about student-centered coaching. This may be a familiar topic to some of you. Well, it may be a new topic to others of you, but don't worry, we're going to cover it all. We're going to go into the history of student-centered coaching. We're going to go into some frequently asked questions and a lot more, so stay tuned as we go through this presentation. And my name is Francesca Gomez. I will be your presenter today, so let's go ahead and get started. So first and foremost, I just want to welcome you in today. So like I mentioned before, we will be talking about student-centered coaching, and we are going to cover a variety of topics that have to do with student-centered coaching. Some of those things include the history of coaching, what it means for your school, maybe how you can implement it into your school if you so choose to, and a lot more. So be sure to stick around as we continue through this presentation. The first thing we're going to touch on is the history of student-centered coaching. So before we go ahead and get started on the student-centered coaching history, I just wanted to make you aware that there is an interactive handout attached to this video as well. You may be wondering what's the purpose of this handout. So this allows you guys to take some guided interactive notes if you choose to. This is a good way to remember things if you would like to recall information about this topic later, or even take notes to present to your administration if you would like to implement this into your own school district. So there is a handout, like I said, attached below if you would like to print that out and follow along. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. The first thing we're going to talk about is what is student-centered coaching. So I'm going to give you about a minute to think about if you have any previous information on what student-centered coaching is. If you're totally unfamiliar with the topic, that is okay too, but I'm going to give you about a minute to go ahead and pause the video and recall any prior information that you may have on this topic. Okay, now that you've had about a minute to pause the video, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So the first thing that student-centered coaching is it is providing support to the teachers. This may be providing support across a wide variety of things. So for example, one thing that a coach may provide support to the teacher on is data collection. The coach may provide support on data collection by explaining to the teacher how to collect the data, when to collect the data, or analyzing the data after it's already been collected. This is just one area that the literacy coach may provide support to the teacher on. Another area that they may provide support on is presenting the actual instruction. They may co-teach, they may co-plan. This may look like a lot of different things. They may also provide support to teachers on differentiation and how to know when to differentiate, what to differentiate, and who needs the differentiation. So these are just a couple examples of what that coach may provide support to the teacher on. Okay, so another point, what is student-centered coaching? It is data-based. So the best way to make sure that student-centered coaching is happening is making sure that that data collection is happening. And then you can revolve everything around what that student needs and what they show they need through that data collection. Okay, so going off of that, what is student-centered coaching? It is centered around what the students need. So like we just talked about, data collection is the best way to make sure that the students are getting exactly what they need and we're not just guessing or following a standard scope and sequence, even though the students don't have the prior information necessary to be following that scope and sequence. Okay, next point. It is also rooted in standards and curriculum. So this may be a common misconception. You may think, if it's being based on all data and centered around the students, it may not be following a specific standard or curriculum. No, this is not true. The best way to assure that students are still meeting grade level expectations is to make sure that the student-centered coaching is still rooted in standards and curriculum. Okay, another thing that student-centered coaching is it is collaborating to make sure those targets are met. Collaborating may look like a lot of different things, and it may happen over a lot of different things. But some of the things that a coach and a teacher may collaborate on is the co-planning process, the co-teaching process, or reflecting with one another about what went well throughout the coaching cycle, or maybe what needs changed. So these are just a few points about what they may collaborate on, but there are so many more things that they could collaborate on all throughout the coaching process. process, okay? The last point I want to talk about on what student-centered coaching is it is continuous. A lot of people look at coaching as, maybe you're collaborating with the coach for a 2-week period, and then there's a month or two break, and then you're collaborating again for a 2-week period. That is not how student-centered coaching should be. So we will talk about this a little bit later in the presentation, but there are things called coaching cycles, and these are continuous, happening all year round from start to finish of the school year, making sure that the students are always getting directly what they need, okay? All right, so the next point we are going to talk about is the history of coaching as we continue to learn what student-centered coaching is. The next topic we're going to touch on is the history of student-centered coaching. So the idea of coaching in schools began in the 1990s, and so this is a rather new topic in the education world. So in the 1990s, it was presented as an all-inclusive reform program. So the role of coaching was looked at as almost one and the same as a reading specialist. So when you think about the duties of a reading specialist, this includes things like pulling small groups, maybe providing differentiation for low learners, filling those achievement gaps, and really targeting those low readers and helping them fill in those achievement gaps and get back up to level. So that changed in 2018 when the standards for the reading professionals highlighted the role of a literacy coach by separating it from the role of a reading specialist. So they are now two different positions and they are no longer looked at as similar, okay? So again, in 2018, this is when the role of coaching really started to change and be looked at as different from a reading specialist. As we move through the history of coaching, we're going to take a look at the job description of a literacy coach in the past versus what it is today. So I found a great research article that thoroughly explains, again, the job description of a literacy coach and what it was in the past and what it is explained as today and what they are expected to do in the classroom today. So in the past, literacy coaches were expected to provide extensive knowledge of literacy development and pedagogy. That was the whole job description, just that little blurb it. And again, it was very similar to what a reading specialist was expected to do. But now in the current day, they should be able to apply principles of andragogy, critically examine literacy practices, promote reflective discussions that address issues of equity and access, and advocate for change within their school communities, necessitating shifts in thinking about their role. Now, this can be very complicated, shifting the minds of teachers and how they look at the role of literacy coaching. It has changed a lot within the last 5 years, so it is very important to add that little blurb it into the job description in the current day and help teachers understand what the new process of literacy coaching looks like. Now we're going to move forward and look at the history of coaching and what has truly changed from when it first came out to what is happening today, or what should be happening today. So first and foremost, there is more collaboration with teachers taking place. Like we touched on before, this is not just collaborating with teachers for maybe a week and then not talking to one another for a month and then collaborating again for another week. No, this collaboration is continuous, and this collaboration is over a wide variety of things. You could be collaborating on data collection. You could be collaborating on co-planning, on co-teaching, on implementation. The collaboration should be happening continuously. Another thing that has changed is that it is student-centered and data-based. So coaching did not necessarily used to be student-centered and based on data. It used to follow a scope and sequence, and it was just on an as-needed basis. So this is a critical thing that has changed for the better in coaching. Another thing that has changed is the reflection between the coach and the teacher. So again, since the role of coaching has changed, now coaches help teachers reflect on how they are teaching and what they are teaching. And same thing with teachers to coaches. The teachers help the coaches reflect on how they are coaching, how the coaching cycle is going. Okay. Another thing that has changed is advocacy. So literacy coaches did not used to be expected to advocate for the teachers and for the school, but now at this point that is part of their job description, to advocate for teacher support, to advocate for student needs, to advocate for that student-centered coaching. Okay, another thing that has changed is that there is a lot more co-teaching and co-planning occurring. So a literacy coach did not necessarily used to co-teach and co-plan. Now, an effective literacy coach, an effective student-centered literacy coach, should definitely be co-teaching with the teacher and co-planning. Okay, that is part of that collaboration aspect. So now that we have taken a look at coaching in the past and coaching in the present and the history of student-centered coaching, we are going to go ahead and move forward to our next topic on student-centered coaching, and we are going to look at the coaching models. So let's go ahead and jump right into looking at those coaching models. The first thing we're going to go ahead and talk about is what is a coaching model. So a coaching model is designed to guide an individual through the obstacles involved with getting to an end goal. So in other words, this may be explained as coaches guiding and providing support to help the teacher and student meet the goal or target of that coaching cycle. So teacher and literacy coach working together to meet that same end goal. That being said, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the goals, objectives, and outcomes of other coaching models versus a student-centered coaching model, and then we will compare the two. So for an other coaching model, the goals may not focus on targeted interventions. They may just be centered around what comes next in a scope and sequence rather than what that student truly needs. So there may not be a lot of data collection going on, and it is likely not surrounded around what the student needs. It is probably more so surrounded around a scope and sequence. That being said, the objectives. The objectives may be completed in order following a scope and sequence, again, rather than what a student needs. So the outcome may vary depending on what the achievement gaps are of that student. So if the student has very little achievement gaps, then you may receive great outcomes. But if that student does not understand all of the previous information necessary to what you are starting at and what you are teaching at right in that moment, then the outcome may be very disappointing because you are not centering it around that student and what that student specifically needs. Now we're going to go ahead and look at a student-centered coaching model. So the goals of a student-centered coaching model are based on data and set by the teacher and coach together for the students to work towards. Now that last part is so important, that the teacher and coach create the goal together and are simultaneously working on it and attending to it daily. Okay, so again, the main purpose of these student-centered coaching models is to set those goals together and make sure that they are being worked towards and hopefully achieved by the end of a coaching cycle. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is an objective in a student-centered coaching model. So objectives should be based on data and what skills the student needs targeted. These are not always going to be based on what comes next in a scope and sequence. Now, I think it's important to note, though, that when collecting data, you may recognize that certain students need targeted what is sequentially coming next in the scope and sequence. And that is okay because it is based on data. It is not just solely based on the scope and sequence and what is supposed to come next. Okay, so next we're going to look at the outcomes of student-centered coaching model. So outcomes could be a wide variety of things. However, likely achievement gaps are going to be attended to more quickly. And this is because data is happening continuously. It is always being collected. So we are recognizing those achievement gaps quicker and filling them. And this will allow the students to continue the learning process and not fall any further behind. Okay, another outcome is that the teachers are being provided with more support and more reflection is going on. These are both positive outcomes because if the teachers are being provided with more support, then this means that they are able to give more support to the students. Furthermore, reflection is going on continuously. This is a great thing because if teachers are constantly reflecting on how they can do better, how they can provide better instruction, how they can provide better differentiation, then this is only going to benefit the students. This reflection is going to help the students and allow the teacher to continuously become the best teacher that he or she can be. Now that we have gone ahead and looked at other coaching models versus a student-centered coaching model, we are going to go ahead and examine the major differences between the two. So the first point I would like to talk about that is a major difference is that in student-centered coaching, it is all data-based and it is not based on a scope and sequence. Now, like I talked about on the previous slide, the data may show that a student needs what sequentially comes next in a scope and sequence, but the main point that I want to make here is that it is data-based. It is not just sequentially following that scope and sequence no matter what the student data shows. No, it is always going to be data-based, okay? Another major difference is that coaching is meant to be collaborative and continuous. So like we've touched on, in a student-centered coaching model, this collaboration is happening all the time over a wide variety of things. So the coach and the teacher could be collaborating on co-planning, on co-teaching, on implementation, on data analyzation. It could be on a wide variety of things, but they are constantly collaborating and it is happening non-stop. Okay, another major difference is that conferencing is happening regularly in the student-centered coaching model. So conferencing could cover a wide variety of things. So in conferencing, a lot of the time you're talking about, again, planning or what is going to happen during the co-teaching or data analyzation or what is working and what is not working. So in these conferencing sessions, a lot of different things could be happening, but again, the main point to make here is conferencing is happening and that collaboration is happening. Okay, another major difference is that co-teaching is occurring. So in a lot of other coaching models, you are not typically going to see a literacy coach actually in the classroom co-teaching with the teacher. But in the student-centered coaching model, an effective literacy coach should be on some level co-teaching with that teacher. Okay, the last major difference that we're going to touch on is that it is all centered around the student needs. Okay, so again, going back to that first major difference, it is not going to be based on a scope and sequence. It is all centered around what the student needs, and the best way to do that is through data collection and following what that data shows and what that student needs. Now we're going to go ahead and move along and look at what student-centered coaching is and what it is not, okay? So like we've talked about, it is based on data, it is collaborative, it is based on standards and curriculum, it is goal-oriented, and it is targeted, okay? One point that I really want to make is that it is goal-oriented. So again, we need to make sure that the teacher and the coach are working together to create those goals based on data and keeping that goal at the forefront of their mind at all times, okay? Now, what it is not necessarily based on a scope and sequence. So like we've talked about, you may collect data and the student may need what sequentially comes next in the scope and sequence, but it is critical that it is based on data, okay? It is also not conferencing with a coach once every other week only about data. Okay, that is not what the student-centered coaching model is meant to look like. Like we have discussed throughout this presentation so far, it is much more, it's much more than that. So it is also not meant to make teachers feel like they are not doing good enough. a common misconception is that if a coach and teacher are constantly reflecting with one another and pointing out what can be done better, that it can make the teacher feel like they're never doing enough. But that is why it is so important to have a good school culture and a great bond with the teacher that you are working with, or else this can easily happen and it can become very frustrating for both the coach and the teacher. The next question we're going to go ahead and look at is, what does student-centered coaching mean for your school? So the first thing that it means is that there is more support for the teachers. So if teachers are being helped with co-planning, with co-teaching, with data analyzation, and so much more, they're going to feel much more supported and like a weight was lifted off their shoulder. And because of this, the teachers are going to feel much more supported and in return going to be able to support the students much better. Another thing that it means for the school is that co-teaching is happening. Co-teaching is always going to be a positive thing because it means that there is more support in the classroom for those students, okay? So think about co-teaching. If there's 20 kids in a class and 2 teachers, they're going to be much more supported than if there's 20 kids in a class and 1 teacher. Okay, another thing that it means for your school is that data-based learning is happening. So it may not be data-based learning from the very start to the very finish of your day every day, but throughout the day at some point, data-based learning is happening and student needs are being targeted. Another thing that it means for your school is that collaboration is happening. This is a great way to build your school culture and have the teachers and coaches come together and really focus on helping the students. Okay, another thing it means is that coaching cycles are focused on a common goal, okay? So like we've talked about, the teacher and the coach are coming up with goals for these students together that are based on data, okay? And these goals are being met, they're being achieved. The students are moving through the learning process and not getting stuck at one certain point. Another thing that it means for your school is that we are filling achievement gaps. So like we talked about a couple slides back, because we are continuously collecting data, those achievement gaps are being recognized almost immediately and being tended to. They are being filled and the students are able to then continue the learning process and not get stuck, okay? Another thing that it means for the school is that it is providing students with instruction based on curriculum and standards. Okay, so even though it is data-based, it is still going to be based on curriculum and standards as well. The next question we're going to go ahead and take a look at is, how can student-centered coaching align with the district's improvement plan? So one common thing that districts likely want to improve is raising student test scores. This can be done through student-centered coaching because student-centered coaching provides more support to the teachers. We are also filling achievement gaps quicker. It is providing more support for students through co-teaching, and teachers are reflecting constantly on how to get better. Okay. Another thing that districts also want to improve is raising student reading levels. This can be done through student-centered coaching by setting your goals, your coaching cycle goals, around helping students decode and target phonics. This will allow them to become more comfortable with reading and in return raise their reading levels. Also, it is providing more student support through the co-teaching process. Another thing that districts often want to improve is providing more support to both the teachers and the students. This can be done through student-centered coaching by allowing teachers to get support through conferencing, co-planning, co-teaching, and more that we've talked about that happen during a student-centered coaching model. And in return, students are supported through having a co-teacher in the room sometimes. They are also more supported by having focused goals that are targeted on their needs. And lastly, they are more supported because if teachers are more supported, they are going to be able to provide the student with more support as well. We're now going to go ahead and move on and talk about planning the implementation. Okay, so implementation of student-centered coaching can definitely be difficult, but if it is done correctly, it is going to be rewarding across many aspects of the school district. So first and foremost, it is important to find somebody who has the district goals in mind and is willing to base their coaching around those goals. So like we talked about in the previous slide, if one of the district goals is to increase test scores, then it is important for the coach to understand this goal and base their coaching cycles and their goals around this district goal. Second, it is important that this person is trained on student-centered coaching and how to effectively collaborate with teachers. Okay, these are two common things that I see with coaching happening today. Is number one, that a coach does not fully understand what student-centered coaching is, and for that reason, they are not being a totally effective coach. And number two, they don't understand how to effectively collaborate with the teachers. And because of this, the teachers get frustrated and the teachers, in some sense, feel maybe a little attacked and like they are not doing enough, okay? The third thing that is important for implementation is to give the coach time to get to know the students and the teacher to understand what goals are going to be useful. It is not realistic to hire on a coach to fill a student-centered coaching role and then ask them to jump right into a coaching cycle on their first day or first week on the job. They need to get to know the teachers, they need to understand the students in order to effectively jump into a coaching cycle and understand what goals need to be set and met. The fourth thing that is necessary when planning implementation is that it is important for the coach to understand coaching cycles and begin planning those coaching cycles as they get to know the students and the teacher. These coaching cycles are going to be continuous, so it is important that they understand how a coaching cycle works in order for it to be effective. The fifth step in planning implementation is that the coach will begin collaborating with teachers. They will begin co-planning, modeling, co-teaching, conferencing, setting goals, analyzing data, and more. Okay, this first coaching cycle and the first time of them doing this process, it may be rocky and they may need to adjust, but that's okay and that is normal. And the sixth step in planning implementation is that it is critical for administration to support these coaches and provide the training necessary, okay? So a lot of coaches are not provided with proper training and they don't understand what student-centered coaching looks like or is. So for that reason, they are not able to effectively do their job. So it is so important for administration to provide those training opportunities. And also, if this coach is providing support to teachers and students, it is so important that they are also feeling supported by administration. There can be a lot involved with implementing student-centered coaching into your district, and it may feel overwhelming, but here is the important things to make sure that you understand and remember, okay? They need to understand the district goals, okay? They need to be aware of what student-centered coaching is. They need to have training opportunities in order to fully understand coaching cycles and what an effective coach looks like. And they need to be able to collaborate with teachers and participate in planning. Okay. And lastly, they have to have the opportunity to co-plan or co-teach and work on whatever else may be necessary. So at this point, I'm going to give you about a minute or 2 minutes, however long it might take you, and you can go ahead and pause the video. I want you to think about it. Think about what implementation of student-centered coaching would look like in your school district and how complicated it may be to implement it. But then I also want you to think about what the rewards could be from having this implemented into your school district. So go ahead and pause the video whenever you're ready. Take a minute or two to think about this, or if you're with somebody, you could even collaborate and talk with them about it. So go ahead and pause this video. I'll give you about a minute or two to do that. Now that you've joined the video again and hopefully hit unpause, I hope that you had time to think about how this would look in your school district and the benefits that could come from it. So now we're going to continue on and we're going to talk about some frequently asked questions in regards to student-centered coaching. So the first question I want to touch on is, what does a student-centered coaching cycle look like? So throughout this entire presentation, I've been referring to student-centered coaching cycles. So now we're going to take a look at a little chart that I thought was very useful in understanding what a coaching cycle could look like. So stage one for starting a coaching cycle is setting a goal for students in relationship to the standards, okay? So remember, these goals need to be set by both the teacher and the coach together, and it is so important to make sure that this goal is known and understood by both the teacher and the coach and worked towards together. Okay, and yes, it will be based on standards, but it will also be based on student data. Step 2 of the cycling process will be to assess the students to determine their performance against the goal. So this will almost be like a pre-assessment, if you will, and this will show where the students are at before going ahead and targeting that goal. Then step 3 in the process is implementing instruction that meets student needs. So you assess them, you understand where they're at, you're going to go ahead and target those needs in a process, a series of days of instruction. You can set that series of days between you and your coach. It could be a 5-day implementation, a 10-day, whatever you think is necessary. Then step 4 in the coaching cycle process is to reassess in order to determine if the student has reached the goal or not. So that is very important, because if they have not reached the goal, then you are not going to continue on with a different goal and start a new coaching cycle. You're going to make sure that they reach the goal before continuing on and moving on to a different targeted intervention, okay? The next question we're going to cover is, what does a student-centered coaching cycle look like? So a student-centered coaching cycle can look very different depending on the goal that is set for that cycle. However, in most cases, it's going to start with data collection and then setting the goal and making sure that you have that pre-assessment data to show that this is valid and a valid goal to set for the student. And then you are going to begin the co-planning process. So once that has begun, there will be a series of conferences, observations, modeling, co-teaching, and planning that will take place continuously throughout this coaching cycle. Now, you can set the length for your coaching cycle. You could maybe think that it only will take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, however long you think it will take, but it should be continuous and happening daily, that you're either conferencing, observing, modeling, co-teaching, planning, whatever it may be. Okay, next, usually in the first week of the cycle, there's going to be a lot of conferencing and planning, modeling, and observing, not necessarily a lot of co-teaching happening just yet, to make sure that you have the coaching cycle set up in the manner that you want it set up, and that you're both on the same page and feel that that goal is going to be achievable. After that first week, usually student-centered coaching consists mostly of co-teaching, co-planning, and conferencing. The next question we're going to talk about is, how does anybody have time for this? This is a common question when it comes to student-centered coaching, because at first it can seem overwhelming and like it's too much and that teachers already have enough on their plate, which I agree. Teachers have a lot on their plate already as well. But this student-centered coaching is meant to help support the teachers, and that is what we have to remember. So the first point I want to make is that data-rich conversations can be time-consuming, and this is something that regularly happens in the coaching cycle. It can also be intricate to figure out. Therefore, it is critical to have administration on board and willing to create a master schedule that prioritizes teacher collaboration. So this may look like giving teachers an extra planning period once a week, or adding 10 minutes on to their planning period specifically for these conversations. But it is so important to have administration on board and willing to do this. Another point is that teachers cannot be expected to give up their planning time multiple days a week in order to make this work. We already have enough that we need to plan and figure out daily in order to keep the classroom running. This cannot become an expectation that teachers have to give up their planning once, twice, 3 times a week in order to make these meetings happen. It has to be another time of the day, and again, administration has to be on board and willing to make this work. Another important aspect of this is finding a process for diving into data. So like we talked about with that first point, data conversations can be time consuming, but if you set a process to facilitate the conversation and keep it on track, then sorting through data can take a lot less time. So this is another very important point that will definitely help these conversations move quicker so that the conferencing time in regards to data will not take as much time as it normally would. Another very valid, frequently asked question is, if coaches are supporting everybody else, how do we make sure that they are receiving support as well? So the first point I want to make about this topic is that we can support them by providing them with professional development opportunities focused on coaching practices. So oftentimes coaches are asked to attend professional development opportunities that really have nothing to do directly with coaching. So if we offer them those professional development opportunities focused on the coaching practice, then they will be able to receive that support and understanding on how to grow as an effective coach. Okay, another way that we can offer them support is along those same lines, providing them professional development focused on curriculum and instruction. If they can receive professional development on understanding curriculum and instruction at a deeper level, then they will be able to also give this information to teachers as well. And so by supporting them and giving them this professional development opportunity, it's not only supporting them, but it is also helping support the teachers as well. Another point on how we can support literacy coaches is by allowing them the time to give small group coaching observations. So maybe in your district, there's a group of 4 or 5 coaches, and they each can come in and observe one another and allow each other to see the things that are happening that are great and the things that are happening that are maybe not so great, and reflect together in order to figure out the most effective way to be student-centered coaches. Another way that we can support them is by allowing them to have one-on-one coaching sessions with maybe a more senior coach. Lastly, we can provide them support by providing them with the support that is aligned with the stage of coaching that they are in, especially new coaches. So for example, if a coach is in the beginning process of starting out their very first coaching cycle and they're in that first week, providing them with the support that is aligned with the struggles that will come with starting up your first coaching cycle. This may be a professional development, this may be time with a one-on-one coach that's older than them, who's been through this and can explain to them what's going on and what's normal and maybe what's not so normal and needs to be adjusted. These are just a few examples of how we can better support our literacy coaches. So furthermore, going off of what I was just talking about in that last question and providing aligned support with what the coaches are going through in that moment, this is a great chart that I found, and it is first year coaching support at a glance, but it can be more than just for your first year. So it'll explain, you can see the common challenges for the new coaches and then support for new coaches as well, aligned with those certain months and certain time frames that they may be in. This is a great graph that could help new coaches and maybe not so new coaches, and allow administration and teachers to provide that support for those coaches and understand what they are going through during that time as well. The next question we're going to go ahead and touch on is, how do you plan lessons based on what students need? And like we have been touching on throughout this professional development is the very main point of data, data, data. So if you go ahead and take a baseline data, you can look for commonalities amongst different students. That will help you to understand where the achievement gaps are and how you can group the students together to target the skills. Because it can feel very overwhelming if you feel like you have 20 different kids and you need to target them in 20 different ways. Usually there's going to be areas where different students have the same achievement gap. And this will allow you to group the students together based on their needs and target those skills as a group rather than one-on-one. Furthermore, how do you plan lessons based on what students need? You can collect data throughout the process, and once a student is showing that they have mastered the current targeted skill, look at the baseline data for what other skills may need targeted, or you can also give a screener to determine what further instruction needs to happen. So for example, if you were 2 weeks into a coaching cycle that is supposed to be 4 weeks long, but you go ahead and collect data and there is one student that is just really excelling and just really rolling through the information and they get it, they fill their achievement gap, they understand it, you can go ahead and look back at that baseline data that you took and maybe see what other areas that they may have an achievement gap in. Or you can give a whole different screener and determine what further instruction needs to happen from here. Okay, another thing is that you can base your lessons on what students need. Okay, so we've talked about this throughout the entire professional development. This is very important. You're basing your lessons on what the students need. And how do you do that? You look at the data, okay? So you may be thinking, what can I do if I want to make this happen in my school district? So like we've talked about, there's a wide variety of benefits that come from student-centered coaching. And one way that you can help implement this in your school is talking with your administration. So if they are unaware of what student-centered coaching is or how it can benefit the school, then they are definitely much less likely to implement student-centered coaching into your district. But if you take the time to inform them and make them aware of all the great benefits that we've talked about, such as building your school culture, working towards your district improvement plan, and so much more, taking the time to inform them on this information will hopefully open up their mind to the idea and possibly make them want to implement this in your district. So the main things that you can do are talk with your administration and just make sure that you inform them on everything that we've talked about in regards to student-centered coaching. In conclusion, we're going to go ahead and briefly touch on some of the main points that we've discussed today during our professional development opportunity. So first, student-centered coaching can act as an improvement plan for your school. Like we touched on, it can act as an improvement plan by raising test scores, providing more support to teachers and students, raising reading levels, increasing school culture, many different things that would be very beneficial to the school district. Another topic that we talked about is student-centered coaching is a great way to keep instruction data-based. Now, I understand that most likely database instruction is not happening from the very start to the very end of your day. However, if student-centered coaching is happening, then at some point in the day, students are receiving database instruction targeted on exactly what they need, which is so important for the students because that allows them to fill those achievement gaps and continue in the learning process. Another major point that we talked about today is student-centered coaching can improve collaboration amongst teachers and coaches. So it can work to build school culture and the collaboration is happening continuously. Like we talked about, they are collaborating on co-teaching, co-planning, data analyzation, and so much more. So this is a great way to help build your school culture, being that teachers and coaches are collaborating on a daily basis. Another main point that we talked about today is that student-centered coaching is continuous. So I just touched on that just a little bit, but Our coaching cycles are happening nonstop from the start of the year to the end of the year. We are continuously starting and ending coaching cycles as goals are set and met. So this is happening nonstop, meaning that students are being targeted and their needs are being met continuously all year, which is great. The last point I would like to briefly review is that student-centered coaching is absolutely useful. So like we've talked about, it can work as an improvement plan, it can improve your school culture, and so much more. There are so many great benefits to student-centered coaching that we have talked about throughout this past 45-minute professional development opportunity, and I hope that you decide to go and share some of these with your own administration. To go ahead and end this presentation, here are the references that I used to create today's professional development opportunity. If you want to go ahead and take a look at any of these resources further, they are linked here for you. So go ahead and take a look at those. Thank you guys so much for listening to this professional development opportunity, and I hope I taught you just a little bit more about student-centered coaching, and I hope that you choose to try to possibly implement this in your own school. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you guys have a great day.